Sandra from the Cherry Heart podcast. Hopefully you'll have seen my first video about how to read charts, which is just a little basic introduction and some information to get you started on reading charts. Now I'm going to go through a chart with you step by step, so that hopefully that will give you confidence in reading charts yourself. So the chart I'm using for this is my heart square, which is the swatch or sample square from my new Nature's Walk crochet along. So if you wanted to follow along and print that chart out, that is available for free. I'll pop the link in the down bar below. And this is the square that it makes, and it has these hearts on it, as you can see. So if you'd like to follow along and make a square with me, you can pop along to that link and download a copy of the introduction, which has that heart pattern in for you, and we'll make it now. So as I mentioned in my last video, I've popped the starting point on the chart, so we can see where to begin, and this is a square, so we'll be making it in the round. So as you can see from that first round, if we do a close-up of that, and I'll pop that on the screen for you so you can see, it starts with 4 chains, and there's a little slip stitch symbol going from the first to the last chains. So let's make that now. So there's my 4 chains, and then the slip stitch shows being made into that first chain. So if we just do a little slip stitch, and that gives us a tiny little loop to work our first round into. So let's look at the first round. So you can see that directly off of that slip stitch is a series of chains, and as I mentioned again in the last video, the chart itself will go round anti-clockwise, so we'll follow it anti-clockwise, and then if you're right-handed you'll also be crocheting anti-clockwise, and if you're left-handed obviously you'll crochet in your normal way clockwise, but we just need to remember to follow the symbols visually to the left. So we'll make those 4 chains that it says first, and then we've got 3 of the treble crochet symbols all going into the same place, or that's a double crochet if you're in America. So let's make those first 3 trebles. There we go. And then there's 2 chains. So those are the 2 chains, and you can see on the chart that they're clearly going to be a corner. So we already know what sort of shape we're making, we can see it. So then we need to continue following around, so we have another 3 trebles, another 2 chains, and that's made another side of the square, and again at the bottom there's 3 trebles and 2 chains. So we've got our 3 sets of 3 trebles, and then now we're starting to come round to the beginning. So we can see there's 2 treble stitches being made into the same place, so we'll pop those in. And then there's 2 slip stitches. So if you've made crochet squares in the round before, you'll know it's usual to close up the round to complete it by making a slip stitch, and it shows on our chart here that we're making that into the 3rd chain. So let's do that. Now we could leave it there, but I've actually got another little slip stitch on my chart, And what that shows is in my written patterns, I always make a slip stitch into the actual chain space. It brings the yarn over nicely to the middle of the corner, ready for the next round. So that's why there's a second slip stitch on there. And you can see that I've put it over the third chain. So it's not going into the fourth chain because I'm not showing it going into the fourth chain. And we've already made a slip stitch into the third chain. So it has to go over the third chain and into the space. Oop. So there's our first round complete. Let's have a look at the second round. So the second round begins in the same way. We've changed to the black symbols again now, and we've got the 4 chains at the start. Then we've got 2 trebles, and they're all being made into the same place. Now with charts you do have a little bit of choice where I've got 2 trebles there shown over the chain. So you could decide to work them into the chain itself, or you can just work them into the chain space. So if you've made a granny square like this before, you'll know it's usual to work into the chain space in the corners. So let's work into the chain space here too. So there's our 2 trebles in that corner space. And then we've got 3 symbols, 3 treble crochet symbols, or double crochet if you're in America, sorry. And each one is going into the treble below, or the stitch below. So let's make 1 treble into each of those stitches as it shows. There we go. And then the next corner, we've got another 2 trebles, 2 chains, and another 2 trebles. And they're all showing worked over those 2 chains of the corner. So we're going to work all of those into the corner. So we've got the 2 trebles, 2 more chains to make a new corner, and then 2 more trebles. So as you can see, the next 2 sides are the same. We've got 3 symbols, 3 trebles worked into the stitches below, and then the corners are the same. So let's work those next 2 sides, and then we'll look at the end of the round. So there we go. I've worked those 2 sides and 2 corners, and we've now got the last side to complete. So if we look at the chart, we've got 2 more trebles, UK terms, or doubles in US terms, that are made into the stitches below. Let's make those. And then we've got a treble that's going into the top of the slip stitch that we made. So that's going into the top of this chain from the row below. So when we make 3 chains at the beginning of a round, that is the same as working or we count it as a treble stitch or an American double. So we need to do a stitch into there as well. And then if we look back at the chart, there's 1 more stitch to do, and that's to complete the corner. So in all the other corners, we have 2 trebles, 2 chains, 2 trebles. And so far we have 2 trebles and we have some chains. So we have the 3 chains that are making off 1 of our trebles and just a chain for the space. So we need to make that last treble. And you can see on the chart there's another treble going into that space there. So we'll make that. And then again we've got our slip stitches to close. So 1 into the 3rd chain, or the top of what we're counting as a treble, and then I've got a second slip stitch, so we'll put that into the chain space. So there we go, 2 rounds completed. So let's look at the 3rd round. We've got something a tiny bit different on this one. So it begins in the same way. So we've got 4 chains, we've got the 2 trebles into the same corner space, and then we've got 3 treble stitches or American double stitches. So the next thing on the chart is an oval or a chain. So we need to make a chain, which we've done, and we can also see that there's no stitch being worked into the corresponding stitch below, so we can leave that. But the next thing on the chart is another treble being worked into the next stitch along. So let's make that. So as you can see, we've got a chain and we've got a space, and that looks the same as on the chart. There's also a space on the chart. So we'll carry on now, finishing that side with these 3 trebles and the corners. And then I think I can leave you to finish the rest of that round yourself, so you can see what to do from this side, and you can see from the charts all the sides are the same. We know to make the trebles in the stitches, and we know to make a chain and miss one. So we'll go right round to the beginning again, and I'll meet you there. Okay, so here we are on the 3rd round. I'm almost finished now, so I've made the first 3 stitches. I've made a chain, so we know we're going to stitch 1, and then we have 2 trebles or doubles if you're in America into these last stitches. And then I'm just going to show you that end bit again. So we need to make another treble into this last treble here, which is actually our starting chain from the row below, but we're going to count it as a stitch. And then we just need to make a treble into the space as well to complete the corner. Those are all the stitches, and then it's just those slip stitches to finish the round. So we've got 1, 2, 3 chains. We do it into the top of the 3rd chain so that those 3 chains count as a treble. And then we do a slip stitch into the corner space just to get nicely up to the centre there for the next round. So we're ready to begin round 4, which starts in the same way as the other rounds. 4 chains, 2 trebles into the space, and then 3 trebles into the stitches below. And of course that's doubles if you're using American terms. So I'm just going to show you this bit as it's slightly different from the row below. So I've made the 3 stitches into the stitches below, and now we've got 2 chains. So let's make our 2 chains, and this time you can see there's 2 stitches which have been skipped and not worked into, and there's a treble stitch going into this chain, or a double stitch going into this chain. So again, as I said before, you have a little bit of choice with charts. You could work it directly into that chain if you wanted to, or you can just work it into the chain space. I'm going to work it into the chain space. And then there's another 2 chains, and again these stitches aren't worked into, so we know we have to skip those, and then the next stitch is made after those 2 that we've skipped, and then it's just 3 more trebles into those stitches, and then we can make the corner. So I'm going to let you finish that round by yourselves. All the sides are the same, and we know how to join the round at the end now, and that's the same as it has been before. So I'll meet you for round 5. Okay, so here we are at the end of round 4. This is what things are looking like. So we're ready to start 5. I'm sure you know how this is going to start now, so it looks fairly similar to all the ones before. So let's start the corner and make those first 4 trebles or doubles if you're in America. Okay, so I've made my first 4 stitches into the ones, well, I've made the corner and then the first 4 stitches into the stitches below. Then the chart is saying to make 2 chains. So it's saying to skip this chain, and it's showing a treble stitch right above this second chain. So again, as I said with chain spaces, you could make the stitch just into the chain space if you wanted to, but because this is a chart that's sort of making a definite picture, and because the treble is definitely above this one chain and not sort of hovering over both, I'm going to actually make it into the stitch, into the chain this time. So I'm going to make it into that second chain that it shows it pointing at. Then we've got a treble or double crochet American terms into the stitch below, and then the same thing on the other side. There's a treble, you could put it into the chain space, but as it's pointing directly at that chain and I want these stitches to stay nice and tight together, I'm going to actually work it into the chain. So that one's going into that first chain. Then there's 2 chains, and then again it shows the stitch being missed, so we're going to work into this next one here. And then make our way to the end. So we've just got a series of stitches to the end and then the corner. There, so that's the one side of that square. That's how that works and is going to look. So now you can complete the other sides and finish, and we'll meet at round 6. So I've completed all of round 5. And I've begun round 6, and I'm at the place where we're going to make some chain spaces. So again, it says to make 2 chains. We're missing a stitch. I'm also going to miss a chain and work into that second chain. So again, I'm working into the chains themselves because I want these stitches to stay together and that the gaps are nice and clear, so that the gaps start to show our pattern. So I've made the first stitch into this group of 3 here. Then on the chart we have a chain, we're skipping one and we're working into the last of those groups of 3, and then one more into the first chain. Then the chart shows 2 chains, skipping the chain, skipping a treble or double if American terms, and working into that next stitch. So you can start to see there's a pattern and a shape emerging with these holes that we're making. So if we go ahead and complete that round, and I'm going to work row 7 up to this point again and show you the next stage. So here we are on round 7. I've worked up until the last stitch before the chain space. Now on the chart here it shows 2 stitches actually being worked into that one stitch. They're both pointing at that stitch, so we need to make 2 into there. Then there's a chain space, and there's quite a big gap now, so the chart is skipping these 2 chains and the next 2 stitches. There's nothing pointing at those at all, but then there's 3 trebles and they're all being worked into this area here. So you could work the 3 trebles into the chain itself, but actually I'm just going to work into the space. There's only 1 chain, there's nowhere much those stitches can go, so I'm just going to work them into the chain space. Then there's another 2 chains, and then we're skipping these stitches and the chains again, and the next thing we can see is 2 trebles in UK or doubles in US terms into this one stitch. So you can see we're creating a mirror image each time. What we've done one side is then repeated on the other side. So then we can start to see the heart shape has emerged. So I'll leave you to finish the rest of this round, and I'll join you on row 8, and I'll just show you the stitches going into these chains. So here we are on the final round. I've worked up to these chain spaces. If you look at the chart, you can see there's another 2 stitches both going into these chains. So you could work a stitch 1 into each chain, or you could work them into the chain space. Now because there's 2 stitches and there's no holes either side, I'm just going to work these stitches into the chain space. They're not going to have space to slip and slide around and not going to ruin the look of our pattern. So I can just work them into the space, which is a little bit easier. So that's what I'm going to do. But you could work into 1 into each chain if you wanted to. That's absolutely fine. So again, I'm just going to work into the chain space. As you see, they can't really move or go anywhere, and you can still see the shape nicely that way. So there's always a little bit of a personal choice when you come to a chart and it shows them above chains. You can actually work into the chain themselves if you think that will be better, or you can just work into the chain space. I like to work into the chain space where I can, just because it's slightly easier, but it's one of those things that can be down to personal preference. So just carry on working around the final edge of the square now. So there's our completed square. I might give this a little block now just to tidy it up a little bit. But I hope that's helped you get started with charts, and I hope you'll also join us on the Nature's Walk crochet along. There's some other squares to come and they'll all be charted as well, so it's a good opportunity to learn a few more of the symbols as we go along and a few more different layouts of charts, so hopefully that will make you feel a bit braver about tackling other patterns with charts in. Okay, till next time, bye!